On August 19, 1944, at the Wehrmacht headquarters in East Prussia, an atmosphere of mixed chaos and fragile hope prevailed. High-ranking Nazi generals were desperately trying to find an exploitable weakness on the collapsing Western Front. General Alfred Jodl, one of Hitler's most trusted advisors, meticulously reviewed the latest intelligence reports. The figures calculated by his staff painted a seemingly salvific picture. Allied supply lines now stretched over 400 miles, from the battered Normandy beaches to the spearhead of the Third Army, commanded by General George S. Patton. The mathematics, according to conventional military experience, was inescapable. Patton, nicknamed Blood and Guts, had advanced too quickly, outpacing his own logistical capacity. Jodl analyzed, "The Americans have outrun their logistics. Patton will halt within days, perhaps hours. No army, regardless of its mechanization, can sustain such advanced speeds without fuel." From his position at the Wolfschanze, Hitler's headquarters, Jodl analyzed what every German general understood. An armored division consumed up to 150,000 gallons of fuel daily when advancing. With the Americans now 400 miles from their supply depots, the conclusion was inevitable. Patton's Third Army would grind to a halt, creating a golden opportunity for the Wehrmacht to regroup at the Seine, perhaps holding out until winter to prepare for a decisive counteroffensive. This firm belief of the German general staff was not unfounded. It stemmed from decades of military experience and recent practical observations. The Wehrmacht itself had pioneered the Blitzkrieg, revolutionized combined arms warfare, and understood intimately the so-called tyranny of supply lines. Their own campaigns had repeatedly stalled not due to enemy resistance, but because logistics failed to keep pace with tactical success. In particular, the disaster in Russia was a bitter lesson. The Wehrmacht's advance into the Soviet Union failed not initially because of the Red Army, but because of the simple inability to supply forces across vast distances. German trucks frequently broke down on poor Russian roads. Worse, horse-drawn wagons, which still accounted for 80% of German military transport, could not match the speed of the Panzer spearheads. Differences in railway gauge exacerbated the situation, causing goods to pile up hundreds of miles from the front. Panzer General Heinrich von Luttwitz, who would command the 47th Panzer Corps from September 1944, had written in July, "The Americans face the same logistical impossibility we faced in Russia. Their mechanical advantage becomes a disadvantage. Machines require fuel, ammunition, parts. They have advanced 400 miles in 30 days. History teaches us what comes next: paralysis." German intelligence meticulously tracked American consumption rates. A single Sherman tank burned 0.5 miles per gallon on roads, far worse cross-country. An infantry division required 700 tons of supplies daily, and an armored division needed 1,000 tons. Patton commanded 12 divisions advancing on a 60-mile front. The mathematics seemed irrefutable. 12,000 tons daily, transported 400 miles from the beaches, over damaged roads and a transportation network the Germans had systematically destroyed during their retreat. Major General Siegfried Westphal, soon to be Chief of Staff to Field Marshal von Rundstedt in September, calculated on August 20th, even if the Americans possessed unlimited trucks, perfect roads, and no mechanical failures, which is impossible, they still couldn't sustain Patton's advance more than another 48 hours. Physical laws cannot be violated, not even by American industry.
What Jodl and Westphal did not know was that 125 miles to the west, an unprecedented solution had been activated. At 2 p.m. on August 25, 1944, in a requisitioned French chateau near Le Mans, Lieutenant Colonel Laurent Ayres of the Motor Transport Service faced a room full of skeptical officers. The math they presented was stark. Patton's Third Army was consuming supplies faster than any army in history, advancing at speeds that defied all traditional logistical planning. Old supply methods, rail transport, scheduled convoys, depot-to-depot distribution had collapsed under the strain. Lieutenant Colonel Ayers announced, "Gentlemen, we are going to create a one-way highway from Cherbourg and the beaches to the front lines. Every vehicle will run 20 out of 24 hours, no stopping except for gas and emergencies. We'll move a minimum of 12,500 tons daily." The name Red Ball Express came from railway terminology, where a red ball freight was an express shipment that took absolute priority over everything else. The Red Ball Express would operate on the same principle: absolute priority, no delays, no exceptions. The technical specifications of this operation defied German military doctrine. 2 parallel one-way highways, one for loaded trucks going forward, one for empties returning. 24-hour operations. Vehicles ran day and night with headlights blazing, abandoning conventional blackout discipline, an act the Germans considered suicidal as it invited air attack. No stop policy, no stopping except for fuel and mechanical failure. Speed and intervals. 5-minute convoy intervals, maintaining a 35-mile-per-hour average speed. Control and maintenance. Mobile maintenance units were posted every 50 miles. MP checkpoints would immediately remove any vehicle traveling below 25 miles per hour. Colonel Charles O. Thrasher, commanding ADSEC, Advanced Section Communication Zone, reviewed the projected numbers. "We need 140 truck companies, a minimum of 5,958 vehicles operating at 90% availability. That's impossible by any logistics textbook ever written." Yet, within 36 hours, the impossible was operational. On August 26, 1944, drivers from the 3916th Quartermaster Truck Company climbed into their GMC CCKW 2.5-ton trucks, nicknamed the Deuce and a Half, loaded with 105mm artillery shells bound for Patton's guns at Melun, 300 miles to the east. The demographic composition of the Red Ball Express was a fact that would have stunned German racial theorists. Of the 23,000 drivers who would eventually operate the route, approximately 75% were African American soldiers, serving in a still segregated army. These men, who could not eat in white restaurants or use white facilities in much of America, were keeping the most celebrated white general's army in motion. The drivers quickly developed their own culture. They painted slogans on their trucks: Patton's Blood Bank, Hitler, Here We Come, Detroit to Berlin Express. They created their own traffic rules. Slower vehicles pulled off immediately. Mechanical failures were pushed into ditches. Any truck traveling below 20 miles per hour was considered a roadblock.
By August 28, German reconnaissance units began reporting an unprecedented phenomenon. Units from Aufklärungs Reconnaissance 116 radioed from positions overlooking the main Red Ball route. Continuous vehicle column, headlights visible for 20 kilometers, no spacing, no blackout discipline, estimate 1,000 vehicles per hour. Americans have abandoned all military precaution. This violated everything German military doctrine taught. Headlights at night invited air attack. Continuous columns presented perfect artillery targets. No spacing between vehicles meant a single disabled truck could halt an entire convoy. Yet the Americans seemed unconcerned. Lieutenant General Edgar Feutinger, commanding the 21st Panzer Division, personally observed the Red Ball Express from concealed positions on August 30th. His report to Army Group B headquarters reflected growing alarm. The enemy operates a supply system beyond our comprehension. Vehicles pass at 30-second intervals, day and night, without pause. They don't hide, don't disperse, don't follow any rules we understand. It's not military science, it's mass production applied to warfare. What the Germans couldn't understand was that American logistics operated on entirely different principles. Where German logistics emphasized concealment and vehicle conservation, Americans relied on volume. Where Germans conserved vehicles, Americans assumed a 20% mechanical failure rate and planned for redundancy.
Where Germans followed strict military procedure, Americans continuously improvised. The numbers achieved by the Red Ball Express defied German calculations of logistical possibility. The first week achieved 89,939 tons of supplies delivered, a daily average of 12,848 tons, a round-trip distance of 686 miles. Fuel consumed by the operation itself was 300,000 gallons. Captured German logistics specialists obtained these figures from American documents and dismissed them as propaganda, but the numbers were real and they were accelerating. By September 5th, the Red Ball Express had established a rhythm that seemed impossible to German logistics officers who still relied on horse-drawn wagons for 80% of their transport. Convoys departed every 5 minutes. Average convoy size, 67 vehicles. Load per vehicle 5 tons standard, often overloaded to 7 tons. Time to cover 350 miles one way, 14 hours average. Turnaround time at each end, 2 hours. 5,000 vehicles in constant motion. When trucks broke down, approximately 1,800 daily, mobile maintenance units performed repairs on the roadside. Mechanics developed a triage system. 15 minutes to fix or push it off the road. Engines were swapped in 45 minutes using mobile cranes. They commandeered French buses to move personnel, borrowed German vehicles, and built bypasses around destroyed bridges using rubble from bombed buildings as roadbed. The Germans, observing this seeming chaos that somehow produced order, couldn't comprehend it. German logistics doctrine emphasized careful planning and strict procedures. The Americans violated every principle, yet their system accelerated rather than collapse. The most stunning revelation for German observers was fuel management. The Red Ball Express consumed 300,000 gallons of gasoline daily just for its own operations, more than many German armies received for all purposes. Yet fuel never ran short. The Americans had created a parallel marvel, Operation Pluto, pipelines under the ocean, laying fuel pipelines across the English Channel. By September 1944, fuel flowed through underwater pipes that German intelligence hadn't even detected.
Major General Warlimont observed from aerial reconnaissance photographs, "The Americans have fuel dumps larger than our entire strategic reserves. They burn more gasoline moving gasoline than we allocate to entire panzer divisions. This isn't war as we understand it, it's industrial overflow." The Red Ball Express didn't just supply Patton, it multiplied his speed exponentially. German military doctrine calculated that an armored division could sustain a 20 to 30 miles advance daily under optimal conditions. Patton's divisions, supplied by the Red Ball Express, averaged 40 to 60 miles daily for weeks. On September 1, 1944, the 4th Armored Division advanced 35 miles in the morning, halted for resupply at noon, Red Ball trucks were waiting with fuel and ammunition, and advanced another 32 miles in the afternoon. This 67-mile single-day advance shattered German defensive planning, which assumed a maximum 30-mile daily advance. General Alfred Jodl and General Heinz Guderian initially refused to believe the reports. Guderian, the father of German armored warfare, stated, "No armored force can advance 60 miles daily for a week. Mechanical failures alone prevent it. This is propaganda or misidentification." But intercepted American radio traffic confirmed it. More disturbing was that the Americans were broadcasting their positions openly, without code, supremely confident in their ability to move faster than the Germans could react. By September 5, 1944, German intelligence had compiled comprehensive reports on the Red Ball Express. The implications were catastrophic for Wehrmacht planning. Every assumption about American military capability required revision. The report contained observations that defied German military science. Americans wasted vehicles prodigiously, abandoning damaged trucks rather than repairing them. Drivers operated on stimulants for days, violating every principle of personnel management. No camouflage discipline, making the entire system vulnerable to air attack that never came. Mechanical failure rates of 30% daily were simply overwhelmed by redundancy. Fuel consumption that would bankrupt any European military. Field Marshal Walter Model's response revealed growing desperation. If these reports are accurate, we face not a superior army, but a superior civilization. They make no effort to hide because they don't fear us. They waste resources because they have infinite resources. We cannot defeat this with military tactics. The Red Ball Express drivers paid a physical price German observers couldn't see. Drivers operated for up to 72 straight hours, hallucinating from exhaustion and benzodrine. Accidents killed 300 drivers during the operations period. Trucks collided in fog, overturned on damaged roads, and burned when overheated engines ignited. Yet morale remained extraordinarily high. These men, mostly African Americans, deny equal rights at home, understood they were making history. They were proving Hitler's racial theories wrong with every mile driven, every ton delivered. Captured German officers provided eloquent testimony to the Red Ball Express's impact. Captain Hans von Luck told interrogators, "We knew we lost when we understood your supply system. You violate every rule, waste fuel, abandon vehicles, exhaust drivers, yet succeed through sheer volume. You've industrialized warfare beyond our comprehension." The psychological impact on German forces was devastating. Wehrmacht soldiers could hear American trucks all night, every night. Endless motors, endless supplies. They had 3 rounds per rifle while the Americans were bringing millions of rounds. The sound itself became psychological warfare.
The vehicles themselves amazed German engineers. The GMC CCPW 2.5-ton truck, the backbone of the Red Ball Express, represented mass production perfection. General Motors had produced over 500,000 of these vehicles by war's end, more trucks than the entire German military possessed of all types combined. These trucks featured innovations Germans hadn't implemented. All-wheel drive is standard, not the exception, automatic tire inflation systems, waterproofing that allowed 30-inch fording, engines that ran on low-quality fuel without modification, and heaters that actually worked in winter. More stunning was the American maintenance philosophy. Where Germans rebuilt engines, Americans replaced them. Where Germans rationed parts, Americans discarded entire vehicles for minor problems. Where Germans had master mechanics, Americans had thousands of competent mechanics who could perform 80% of repairs. As the front moved east, the Red Ball Express adapted with a speed that stunned German planning officers accustomed to weeks of preparation for major logistics changes. When the original route to Chartres became insufficient, Americans created Red Ball Express extensions overnight. White Ball Express Rouen to Paris, Green Diamond Cherbourg to railroad transfer points, Red Lion Bayeux to Brussels, and ABC Antwerp, Brussels, and Charleroi. Each new route was operational within 48 hours of conception. The predominance of African American drivers in the Red Ball Express created cognitive dissonance for German racial theorists. Nazi ideology declared blacks inferior, incapable of technical tasks, and lacking initiative. Yet these very drivers were performing logistics miracles that German forces couldn't match. The African American soldiers understood the irony. They knew what the Nazis thought of them, which made them drive even harder. Every mile they drove proved Hitler wrong. The Red Ball Express required infrastructure Germans deemed impossible to create under combat conditions. American engineers built or reinforced 40 bridges, created 15 major fuel depots, established 26 maintenance stations, and constructed 8 temporary cities for drivers, all while the operation was running. The bridge at Montes had been destroyed by German engineers specifically to halt American logistics. The Wehrmacht calculated replacement would require a minimum of 6 weeks. Americans engineers built a temporary bridge in 14 hours, while Red Ball convoys detoured only 8 miles on hastily bulldozed bypass roads. One Red Ball Express achievement particularly stunned German artillery officers: ammunition supply rates that exceeded their highest theoretical calculations. American artillery units fired without restriction, a luxury no German unit had enjoyed since 1942. During the reduction of meth fortifications in September 1944, the XDX Corps artillery fired 100,000 rounds in 24 hours. The Red Ball Express delivered every round plus a 20% surplus. German artillery defending Metz was rationed to 50 rounds per gun per day. The disparity was overwhelming. The Red Ball Express consumed vehicles at rates that would have paralyzed any other military. By late September, mechanical attrition reached staggering proportions. Average vehicle life, 10,000 miles. Normal, 30,000 miles. Daily deadline rate, 30% of all vehicles. Engines replaced, 500 weekly. Total vehicles destroyed or abandoned, 5,000 plus. Yet the operation never slowed. American production had anticipated such losses. Ships arrived weekly at French ports carrying hundreds of new trucks. Replacement drivers were trained in 2 days and thrown into convoys. German calculations showed Americans destroying more trucks weekly than the Wehrmacht possessed in France. Yet their transport capacity increased rather than decreased. They had achieved something Germans thought impossible: logistics faster than consumption. French civilians along the Red Ball route witnessed American abundance, which contradicted years of scarcity under German occupation. The psychological impact on the occupied population was immediate and profound. The Red Ball Express drivers, particularly African Americans, often shared their rations with French civilians, despite regulations. At every stop, children would gather, and drivers would give them chocolate, cigarettes, and soap. The contrast with the German occupation was stark. Americans casually gave away what Germans had strictly rationed. German intelligence reported the propaganda impact. French civilians now believe American victory inevitable. They cite the truck convoys as proof. Resistance activity has increased 400% along Red Ball routes. In early September 1944, the Red Ball Express faced its greatest challenge. Patton's Third Army had advanced so far that even the Red Ball struggled to maintain supply rates. The round trip now exceeded 700 miles. Drivers were collapsing, vehicles were disintegrating, and German intelligence detected the strain. Panzer General Hasso von Monteuffel reported on September 8th. American supply lines show signs of collapse. Convoy intervals have increased from 5 to 15 minutes. Vehicle speed has decreased. This is our opportunity. But American adaptability again surprised the Germans. Within 72 hours, the Red Ball Express reorganized, creating intermediate transfer points, cutting individual runs to 350 miles, implementing driver rotation systems, establishing forward maintenance bases, and doubling the number of assigned vehicles. By September 12th, tonnage delivery had actually increased. The crisis that should have halted Patton only made the system stronger. Supplementing the Red Ball Express, Americans implemented another logistic solution Germans deemed impossible: large-scale aerial supply. C-47 transport aircraft began delivering critical supplies directly to forward units, each carrying 3 tons. On September 16, 1944, Wehrmacht observers counted 900 transport flights in a single day, delivering 2,700 tons by air. The Luftwaffe, at its peak, had managed 300 tons daily to Stalingrad and considered that a maximum effort. The Americans used transport aircraft like trucks, with no fighter escort concerns or fuel limitations. They assumed losses and overwhelmed them with numbers. The Wehrmacht couldn't compete with this industrial arithmetic. The Red Ball Express operated under command principles that violated German military hierarchy. Junior officers made decisions reserved for generals in the Wehrmacht. Sergeants commanded operations larger than German colonels managed. This decentralization baffles German observers. American logistics operated without apparent central control. Every lieutenant acted like a general, every sergeant like a colonel. Chaos should have resulted. Instead, they achieved efficiency. By October 1944, advancing railheads began to reduce Red Ball Express requirements. The operation that was supposed to last 10 days had continued for 82 days, delivering 412,000 tons of supplies, over 122 million ton miles. German commanders now fighting on their own borders reflected on what they had witnessed. Field Marshal Model wrote in his final report, "We were not defeated by American tanks or planes primarily. We were defeated by American trucks." The Red Ball Express proved that in modern war, logistics is strategy. The transition to rail transport was itself a marvel. American railroad engineers had reconstructed 1,000 miles of destroyed French rail lines while the Red Ball was running. They laid new track faster than the Germans had destroyed it, often using captured German rail equipment. The final Red Ball Express statistics defied every German calculation of logistical possibility.
82 days of operation, 412,193 tons of supplies delivered, 222 million ton miles, average 5,958 vehicles, peak 7,000, total 23,000 drivers employed, 40,000 tons of ammunition delivered to Patton alone. Reviewing these figures in captivity, German officers admitted they had calculated American logistics based on European precedent. They had multiplied their best performance by 3 and assumed that was American maximum. They were wrong by a factor of 10. More profoundly than tonnage and distance, the Red Ball Express achieved something more profound. It destroyed German faith in their own military superiority. Wehrmacht officers who had dismissed Americans as soft and mechanically dependent watched those same Americans achieve logistics miracles through determination and industrial abundance. German prisoners of war would stand silent at prison camp fences, counting passing Red Ball trucks. Some wept. They understood what it meant. Not just that Americans could supply their armies, but that they could waste more than Germans could produce. They were watching their worldview collapse one truck at a time.